Hello and thanks for joining us on another episode of The Eagle. It's time again to discuss how we can keep Nigeria free from the shackles of economic and financial crimes, corruption, and updates on happenings in and around the EFCC. My name is Aisha Mohammed.
I throw away salute. My name na Abdurrashid Bawa. Na me big Oga Pata for Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, where would they call EFCC. I want to invite una make you follow me kill this problem where we dey for Nigeria called corruption. Now this corruption they chop our future and go chop our children's future. I swear say when everything dey all right, we go see work do, light go dey, our roads go better, our institutions go better, where would they carry go school, our children also go school. Please and please, make you help me, join me, kill this corruption. Together, we go make this country better.
Today, the topic of discussion is centered on procurement fraud. What do you know about procurement fraud? Why does it pose a danger in the administration of any government? How can you join hands with the EFCC to bring it to its knees? We have this and more right after this timeout. The chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission EFCC, Abdurrashid Bawa, has appealed to the House of Representatives to insist on the enforcement of regulations by relevant authorities as a way of checking sharp practices and money laundering by operators in the real estate sector. He made the appeal when he received members of the House of Representatives ad hoc committee investigating real estate developers led by the chairman, Honorable Blessing Onyechiono, at the headquarters of the Commission in Jabi, Abuja. Amina Kawa has the details on this and another report.
The EFCC chairman told the committee that the major challenge in the real estate sector was the poor enforcement of regulations by the relevant authorities and urged them to prevail on those charged with the responsibilities of regulating the sector, especially in the Federal Capital Territory, to do their jobs. He assured them of the Commission's determination to fight financial crimes in the sector, which is the reason it has resurrected the Special Control Unit against Money Laundering, SCUMO, to enhance its performance. Bawa, however, pointed out that there are gaps hindering the effective performance of agency and urged the lawmakers to intervene.
If you remember very well, Mr. Chairman, one of the first things I told the world is the fact that we realized here at the EFCC that real estate forms the highest or is the highest avenue in which Nigerians are actually laundering their process of crime here. And we felt that we need to work on it, and we are working in that regard. So when I heard about your committee, we said that okay, it's very good because here is an opportunity for us to work with representatives of this country to see how we can provide lasting solution to this problem.
Speaking earlier, the chairman of the committee, Honorable Blessing Onyechiono, said the committee was at the EFCC to seek the agency's help in achieving its mandate. She said the committee knows the role the EFCC plays in checkmating corruption in the society and recognizes that the Commission has value to add through the activities of the committee, hence the need to collaborate with the Commission.
Mr. Chairman, we acknowledge the role EFCC plays in checkmating corruption in the society, and we recognize that the Commission has unique value it can add to the activities of this committee. Hence, we seek to partner with you. Mr. Chairman, we have come to engage with you and your team, and we want to share our goals or our mandates, and for you to guide us on way forward.
She explained that the committee was set up by the leadership of the House of Representatives with the mandate to investigate allegations of misconduct by developers and work with the relevant ministries, departments and agencies, MDAs, in formulating policies and laws to check financial crimes in the sector. Amina Kawa reporting for The Eagle. The executive chairman of the EFCC, Abdul Rashid Bawa, has advocated for strict compliance and enforcement of extant laws and regulations to promote public accountability and the fight against corruption in Nigeria. The EFCC boss, who spoke through the EFCC's Director of Public Affairs, Osita Onwaja, at a roundtable on accountability organized by the Premium Times Center for Investigative Journalism, PTCIJ, at the Orison Art Source, Abuja, noted that there is no better prevention tool than a vigorous enforcement regime, one that is applied across the board in strict adherence with the extant laws, rules, and regulations. He noted that while Nigerians were adept at comparing their systems with those of other countries, those countries were not doing anything extraordinary other than enforcing their laws or regulations, no matter who it is that has committed the infraction.
I've always maintained that there is no better prevention tool than a vigorous enforcement regime, one that is applied across board in strict adherence and compliance with extant laws, rules, and regulations. It is only in the environment of rigorous unbiased enforcement, under the strict dictates of the law, that I believe we can move this nation forward. Let us face it, those countries we tend to run to borrow the yardsticks for measuring or situating our own collective progress are not doing anything extraordinary. In very plain terms, all they do is enforce their laws, they enforce their regulations, no matter who it is that committed that infraction.
Bawa said the EFCC has done more than any government agency in promoting the development of law in Nigeria.
In this regard, we make bold to say that no agency of government in Nigeria has done more to advance the development of the law in the last 18 years than the EFCC. This is because every day, across the length and breadth of this country, we are using the instrumentality of the law to hold public officers accountable.
He further called on the media and the Nigerian citizens to join hands in ridding Nigeria of all forms of economic and financial crimes. In his address, the Executive Director, Premium Times Center for Investigative Journalism, Dapo Oluroyomi, commended the participants and highlighted the reasons for organizing the roundtable, stating that it was to have the media understand what the legal obligations are in a democracy and to help the media to give consequence and meaning to the accountability matrix. The roundtable, tagged Udeme Accountability Roundtable, Strategic Partnership for Accountability in Nigeria, had in attendance participants from various anti-corruption agencies and civil society organizations. Amina Kawa reported for The Eagle.
Today, the topic of discussion is centered on procurement fraud. What do you know about procurement fraud? Why does it pose a danger in the administration of any government? How can you join hands with the EFCC to bring it to its knees? Answers as we present Procurement Fraud, a Danger to Development. First, let's take a look at what procurement fraud is. Procurement fraud is a deliberate deception intended to influence any stage of the procurement process in order to make a financial gain or cause a loss. The loss is often to the organization giving out the contract. Procurement fraud can be perpetrated by the contractors or subcontractors external to the organization, as well as staff within the organization. They quote exorbitant costs so they could make extra gain for themselves, or they provide substandard materials or services. This criminal act has caused so much loss to organizations and Nigeria as a country. What's the true nature of this fraud depriving Nigeria of her development? Let's join Ojotokutami Eche in this interview segment for insight into the true nature of fraud in public procurement. Over to you, Eche.
Generally, before we begin the explanation about the meaning of procurement fraud, it's very important for us to understand what do we mean by procurement in general. When we say procurement, we mean acquisition of goods and services at the best total cost of ownership in the right quantity and quality and at the right place and time. Then when we look at the other side of the meaning of procurement fraud, we are now talking about the fraud that is committed in this acquisition of these goods and services. Generally, procurement fraud in a single term means breach in the method of acquiring these goods and services at the right amount, at the total cost, and at the right time.
How has procurement fraud affected the economy of Nigeria?
Yes, the procurement fraud has affected the economy of Nigeria in general because without the proper method of acquisition of this procurement of goods and services, the economy is being affected because it contains what we call the provision of goods, the provision of civil works, and then the provision of consultancy services. Why are we saying so is because in the procurement cycle of the federal government of Nigeria, the procuring entity, before embarking on any procurement exercise, that procurement has to be under the notion of either provision of goods or either provision of services or either provision of civil works. When we say civil works, we mean building of bridges, highways, and building of classrooms, building of offices, or any building that contains in the agreement that was entered between the procuring entity and the contractor. And then when we say the provision of goods, we are talking about the supply of materials, we are talking about supply of consumables, we are talking about supply of medical equipment, we are talking about supply of chairs in an entity. Then when we say consultancy services, we are talking about a procurement process in the government entity whereby training, provision of probably a computer training or probably a provision of consultancy services that has to do with on-the-job training by some parastatals and government entity. So generally, in the bid to effect these things, all procurement fraud related matters emanate from the provision of goods, services, as well as civil works.
So how have they affected the economy?
Yes, in the provision of this, there is an issue that we have to look at. Sometimes the procuring entity will collude with the contractor and some breaches will happen. We are talking about the whole tendering process from the beginning of the bid, from the implementation of that bid, right to the implementation of the contract. There are exigencies that will happen that will affect the economy. And this thing will now hamper into what we call the abandoned projects and sometimes diversion of public funds. Because the funds may be inflated, the funds may be diverted, and the project may likely be abandoned or haphazardly done but with substandard materials by a contractor, just in a bid to make sure that he has gotten the funds that is being released by the procuring entity. So this way, federal government money or funds has been siphoned by the contractor. And in such a way, the federal government has been shortchanged. So virtually it has affected the economy. The monies that are earmarked for a project that has not been executed will definitely be utilized in another project in a subsequent year. Or probably that project that's supposed to have been executed, which the monies has been diverted, will not be executed. And at the end of the day, the the community that's supposedly supposed to have enjoyed the services will be left alone and will be cut off completely.
What are the laws that guide procurement in government offices in Nigeria?
The laws that guide the procurement in government offices is the BPP Act, the Bureau for Public Procurement Act. The Section 58 subsection 4 of that BPP Act has already stipulated the offenses that are contained if these guidelines are not followed. The guidelines that are embedded in public procurement in government offices by the BPP stipulate that it must have efficiency, it must have transparency, it must have accountability, and it must have trustworthiness in the process of executing these bidding processes that will give us the right picture of the contract. So the laws are there, and are coupled with other laws that we have of the federal government, especially the Administrative of Criminal Justice Act, the Criminal Act that we are using, and the Penal Code, has stipulated that whoever stole government money and he was found culpable and upon conviction may be liable to be sentenced or sometimes to be debarred from service by the BPP. So this is how far the Act has been helpful to investigators and to the economy of the nation.
In what ways can procurement fraud happen?
The procurement fraud normally started from the word go. When the procuring entity develops a program that they wanted to execute in terms of goods or services or consultancy services, there has to be some processes that they're supposed to embark. One of them is to write to the Bureau for Public Procurement for them to collect what we call the certificate of no objection. This certificate of no objection is like a carte blanche. It's a ticket for them that, okay, we have certified that you people are going into this contract. What we want to do is to follow the guidelines, follow the principle. And in such way, the principles that they're supposedly supposed to follow has to be guided by the BPP. So sometimes the services that the procuring entity wants to embark on will have to be under what we call probably an emergency procurement that relates with issues that has to do with disaster or issues that has to do with things that are emergency in nature, like flood, like let's just say this pandemic COVID-19. So sometimes people will misuse these chances of procuring the right things at the right time that were certified by the BPP. And then what we are now left with will now see insertion. That's a breach that these people will be bringing into the contract procurement. So the issues start from the bid opening. We'll now look at the advertisement, if it is rightly done, which is supposedly to be done in 2 tender journals, including the procuring tender journal, or 2 national newspapers.
Mr. Usman, your last word your last words on this issue before we let you go.
Well, my last word here is people should be very, very careful of what they do in terms of procurement. A contractor that just registered his company will think that, okay, I'm set to go, I'm set to get contract from a procuring entity and I will be able to deliver, without looking at the act, without looking at the regulations. So another thing is procuring entities should be mindful of procuring goods that are meant for consultancy services and lumping them up with the goods that are meant for civil works and lumping them up again with the procurement that are for goods again. So these things are making us very uncomfortable when we want to investigate all these things. So my last word here is fight for corruption is a holistic one. Everybody should be on board. As our present executive chairman rightly pointed out, fighting corruption is holistic one. You do your part, we do our part, and we serve the country for the better.
If you're just joining us, the program is still The Eagle, coming to you from the stables of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, and we've been discussing procurement fraud, a danger to development. So much to learn there. As rightly said by Ahmad Usman, the fight against corruption is a holistic one. Everyone should be on board. Play your part and we do ours. Together we'll make Nigeria a better place. Many people see government money as a community good, one which everyone can dismember and do whatever they like with any day, anytime. But the EFCC says, no, you cannot inflate prices or cost of goods and services just because you have an opportunity to do so. Neither can you provide substandard product or services to government and expect no repercussions. This is because the effects of procurement fraud are overwhelming.
Procurement fraud is a deliberate deception with intent to influence any stage of the procurement process in order to make a financial gain or cause a loss. This kind of fraud can also occur when there are payment claims for goods or services not rendered or that are substandard to what was specified in the job order. Procurement fraud is also seen where employees and sometimes a close outsider collaborates with the insiders of an organization to defraud such organization. If this genre of fraud is not arrested, it can significantly affect procurement performances. This is because procurement fraud squanders limited resources, threatens safety and national defense, cheats taxpayers, and harms government's efforts to obtain goods and services needed for its mission. It also creates more uncertainties about the expected level of profits as well as reduced competitiveness, as only those that can pay bribes are actually considered. With the growing number of companies in need of cheaper services and the increased financial strains on economies, instances of fraud and corruption in the procurement circle are increasing worldwide. Organizations, big or small, are prone to the risk of fraud and corruption in their procurement circle. In Nigeria, for instance, a noticeable percentage of corrupt practices are effected through the purchasing and supply of basic items for some ministries, departments, and agencies of government. The motivations for procurement fraud include personal greed, possibility of getting away, low prosecution rate, societal pressures, and staff moral problems. No one can overemphasize the gravity of the possible dangers associated with fraudulent and corrupt procurement practices. Procurement fraud poses a serious threat to the ability of an organization to achieve its operational objectives. It can hamper the implementation of programs and projects and consequently endanger efficiency in performance. Procurement fraud in public procurement impacts directly on the quality of societal services that should benefit the poor. It can also impede economic development, distort market mechanisms, and create inefficiencies, thereby reducing competitiveness, trade, and direct foreign investment. It is vital to do away with procurement fraud since it dissipates limited resources and stifles economic development. Everyone in the organization must have a background knowledge of the procurement processes and the consequences of breaching the set down rules. There should be proper controls over purchases by ensuring that all purchase requisitions are authorized and approved by the authorized individuals in the organization. All invoices should have a pre-authorized purchase order, and the audit department should randomly select purchasing transactions and ensure that there are no gaps in the implementation of the controls. Segregation of duty also helps in curbing procurement fraud. In other words, a single individual should not create purchase orders, key in invoices, and issue payments. The extravagant personal spending of people responsible for purchasing could be a sign that something is not right. So, be watchful. Therefore, when it comes to procurement fraud, the best step forward is to put together preventive measures that can prevent it from happening. As the adage goes, prevention is better than cure. Aisha Gambari, reporting for The Eagle.
Thank you, Aisha, for that eye-opener on the effects of procurement fraud on each and every one of us and on Nigeria as a whole. We can all see that this effect of procurement fraud cannot be overemphasized. Government must be on the watch out for any sign of fraud and deal with it immediately. Everyone must be on guard against scam of any kind, be it in the procurement process or in our daily lives. And that's how we end today's episode of The Eagle. Do not forget, for matters relating to the economic and financial crimes, please send an email to info@efcc.gov.ng. And to speak to our officers, you can call 0809 3322 644 and follow us on all our social media platforms at Official EFCC. If you see fraud happening, use the EFCC mobile app, The Eagle Eye. Download the app, follow the steps, and report fraud on the go. You can also take pictures of corrupt practices and upload. My name is Aisha Muhammad, and as usual, I leave you with these parting words which says, rather fall with honor than succeed by fraud. Do the right thing always. Goodbye. God bless Nigeria. Please stay safe and be kind to one another.